Okay, Daniel chapter 7, if you're not already there, go ahead and boot up your phone or, please log off of Facebook and, don't pretend you're reading the Bible when you're surfing the web on your phone or something like that. Gotcha. I just realized I forgot something. Kathleen wanted to mention that Karen Grubbs is going to be with us next week. You guys all remember Karen Grubbs? She's the missionary that we've been supporting. She's been in Africa. South Sudan and Uganda primarily, and she's actually been in town for the holidays a little bit, and she had the opportunity to come, and so she's going to come and be with us next week. Give us a long update as to what's going on in South Sudan and in that part of the world, and I think that'll be really cool. It'll be Missions Awareness Sunday too, so it's kind of a neat dovetail that it all came together at the same time. So, cool. Okay, Daniel chapter 7, and I'll begin with the introduction. I've entitled this "The End of the Matter," and I entitled it there that way because that's one of the phrases that Daniel uses in this chapter. Today we will see a big picture view of God's redemptive work on earth brought to a just conclusion. Daniel is shown the throne room of God and some amazing future events which will come in the future, of course, of humanity and the earth. He is given an abbreviated picture. It's not, super detailed. There's a whole lot of things that we might want to know that God just didn't show him. But the chapters that follow, so the rest of the book, let me just put your finger there for a second because I need to tell you this. This is important. Chapter 7 is kind of like the big picture. And then the rest of the chapters in the whole book of Daniel, he gives a little bit more detail and a little bit more detail, and then he kind of concludes. And so we're moving in the book from a place where we're learning a lot about Daniel and his interaction with these earthly kings and the earthly empires that he's been a part of as a government official. And we're moving now into this whole part that's eschatology. It's all end times kind of prophecy. And so we get into, you think it's been a little wild before. It's going to get really wild now as far as the things that the Lord shows Daniel and the way he describes them and communicates them. But it'll kind of, how do I say this? We kind of get the big picture, and then we're going to get the vignettes that fit in to the bigger picture as we go through the rest of the book. I hope I didn't confuse you. You understand that? Okay. So the chapters that follow give us much greater detail about the events yet future to him, yet future to Daniel, which for us are actually history, much of it. And then we get a picture of last days events, which are fleshed out in much greater detail than in the book of Revelation that's given to John at the end of your New Testament. Remember this, I should say, the context of Israel's history in which Daniel is now living. Okay, so you have to kind of put yourself back 2,500 years ago. Israel and Judah have been designated by God as his chosen people, but they have severely broken his covenant, and they are now in exile. Their covenant worship of the Lord has been stopped because the temple has been destroyed. Is God through with them? Think about that for a second. How would you feel if you thought God was done with you? Is that a terrifying thought or what? I mean, that's a pretty hopeless, terrifying thought. These are the things that they're still dealing with as a culture. Daniel's having this. They've been in exile now for a generation. It was prophesied to Jeremiah that it would last 70 years. And they're at, 55, 60 years. But not everybody's clued into what Jeremiah said. Not everybody's paying attention. They're just living somewhere else. They're totally separated from God, and they're like, man, is he just like so irritated and tired of us? He is just done. We're just cast away. And some of this really speaks to that reality. So is God through with them? Has he given up on them and cast them away forever? Has God's plan to overcome evil been overturned by their failures? Daniel's vision gives us much needed encouragement and hope. God still has plans and purposes for them, and they include a glorious future in the kingdom of God. Have you ever felt like you've messed things up so bad, God can't possibly redeem this? He just can't fix this. I have made such a mess. There cannot be a plan B. There can't be another plan. He can't work this out. Yeah, I'm getting some eye contact here and go, oh yeah, that's me. I felt that way. I think this passage really assures us God is so much bigger in his ability to make come to pass what he has promised to bring to pass. We can't even fathom it. Now, do the decisions that we make and the choices that we make matter? Oh yeah, very much. But there's a reality to this big plan that God is going to bring to pass regardless of the choices that you and I make. And so it's kind of an interesting dichotomy in that sense. There's a little bit of a sense of God is going to do this, and it's really kind of a question of, do we want to be a part of it or not? On the good side of things. Because we will be a part of it no matter what. But we're going to choose how we're involved in God's big plan. Okay, let's go to Daniel in chapter 7. If you haven't already turned there, please go there. We're going to look at a couple of things. I'm just going to read the first couple of verses, and then I'll probably have to narrate the rest because it's a long chapter. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. Let me just stop there for a minute, and I'll give you a little more detail here. In Old Testament poetry and thinking, you know how there's 4 points on the compass? When you're looking at 4, you're often thinking about Earth. And so you've got the 4 winds coming from the different places. He's saying this relates to planet Earth. This isn't just a vision, but it relates to here and this planet. The second thing he gives us as a metaphor is a great sea. Again, in Old Testament poetry, they would often picture humanity, the populations of all the people, this great throng, as a sea, as an ocean, if you will. Because you know how the ocean can be pretty chaotic? It's rarely real smooth. Every so often I'll look out on commencement day and I'll go, wow, that's really smooth. But most of the time, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's always moving around. And so he's giving us a poetic picture of forces that are acting upon the earth, that are acting upon humanity, and it's stirring it up from all these different points of the compass. Are you with me? Okay. Have I weirded you out yet? Okay, I'll get you there. Give me a minute. Because this is kind of a wild picture. So out of this sea, then, he sees 4 beasts that come up out of the ocean or out of the sea. So these beasts, if you will, are coming out of humanity. They're being impacted by spiritual forces that are affecting the earth, and then they rise up, okay, in succession to affect the whole planet. Do you guys remember Daniel chapter 2 when we talked about that big statue? Everybody remember that? Bless you. You're welcome. You remember that the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian Empire, and then the chest of silver, and then the belly of bronze, and then the feet of iron and clay. Remember that? Okay, so there was a specific focus on 4 empires. It goes through the whole process, and then eventually there was this big rock that hits it on the feet and destroys it, and it all goes off into chaff. You remember that? Boy, I feel like giving a pop quiz right now. Audrey's like, yeah, do it. School teacher in there, yeah, do it. So there was these 4 empires that were going to affect human history, and that was what Daniel was being shown, but that God was going to set up an empire and a kingdom that would last forever, that it would crush these human empires and they would just be blown away like chaff. Daniel is getting that same vision, only a little bit differently this time, and with a little bit larger scope even than that. So he gets the picture of these four beasts, and the first one that comes up is like a lion that has wings like an eagle. He would know exactly what that meant. We go, wow, that's kind of a weird picture. They actually have tiles and mosaics left over from the Babylonian Empire that they dug up, and guess what their national symbol was? A lion with wings. He knew exactly what this was. There was no question. He was like, oh, there's this big eagle. Oh, well, that's probably America, right? I mean, we would catch on to that. Or there's this big bear. Well, it might be Russia. We do this same thing. We have these metaphors for countries, okay? So he sees the lion, goes through that little process. Then he sees this bear that's raised up on one side. The Medo-Persian Empire, the Persians were dominant in that grouping. And then a third one, which is, this would be exciting to see in a movie sometime. We've got so much computer graphics now, somebody could do this. He sees a leopard or maybe a cheetah, and it has 4 heads, and it has 4 wings. Now, what would that look like? It's like, okay, dreams are weird. What does that mean? It seems pretty clear from looking back in history that he's talking about the Greek Empire. Alexander the Great very rapidly conquered the whole area that was basically the known world in his day, anything that was worth conquering. You realize this guy died in his early 30s? And he had already conquered everything from northern Greece, kind of Macedonia, kind of, the Balkans area, all the way to India. That happened pretty fast to be 30-something and have already accomplished all that. So cheetahs are fast, right? So this is the metaphors. This thing really could move fast. And when he died, his 4 generals took over. 4 heads. Some things to understand when you're reading apocalyptic literature, okay, which is what this is. When you're reading the book of Revelation, when you're reading the book of Daniel, when you're reading Ezekiel, when you're reading some of these books, it's very visual. They don't explain a lot of stuff. They give you these pictures, and a picture being worth 1,000 words, you kind of see it, but it's like, what does that mean? But he lays it out if you understand those cultural metaphors, what this means. A head is usually a king or an empire, and a horn is often a king or an empire. Horns represent power. If you come from an agrarian culture, if you've ever watched bulls or rams fight it out, what do they use? They use their head, and they use horns. So it's a representation of power that they would recognize right away. So you've got these 4 kingdoms coming up out of humanity. God is telling Daniel, this is what's coming in the future. You've been a part of this Babylonian Empire. That one's now gone because this is the first year of King Belshazzar. The first year of King Belshazzar. It's just about gone. You remember when he was thrown into the lion's den? We're kind of going back in history here a little bit. King Darius, I feel like I'm losing you. Are you guys okay? Susie's squinting at me. Go ahead. Yes, we're actually going back chronologically. We're actually going back in the history a little bit. You remember when we talked about King Belshazzar? He was the one that had the hand that came out of the ceiling and wrote, many, many tekel parsin. Remember that? Okay, that was the end of the Babylonian Empire. We're actually before that now that Daniel gets this dream. Okay, so we've actually regressed in time a few years. So, boy, this is interesting stuff, but it's hard to preach. So hang with me here. Hang with me, because it will make sense, I think, eventually, once we kind of get to the point. So Daniel's getting this information. Babylon is just about ready to go. And then the Medes and the Persians are represented by the bear that comes in this thing. And then eventually Alexander the Great. And then eventually there's this 4th beast. This 4th beast that would be analogous to the feet of iron and clay. This fourth beast has 10 horns. How many toes do you have? Kind of interesting, huh? A little bit of an overlap there. Daniel's getting some of this same information that he got the first time, but then it gets expanded out. So he hears all this, and he's being given these visions of the future. This is what is going to happen to humanity in the future, and this is how God is then going to interact with those kingdoms, with these structures of humanity in the future. Pulls away from that, and he's given a vision of the throne room of God. Let's just pick that up right now. Daniel chapter 7, and this would be verse 9. So, let's see if I can try and describe this. What I believe we're being given, or what Daniel was being given, is a heavenward view of everything. He's looking down over human history. He's looking down over the earth, and God is showing him these beastly kingdoms. Beasts aren't generally nice. And these are, did you notice they're all carnivorous creatures? We got a lion, we got a bear, we got a leopard or a cheetah, and then we got some beast that's so intense he can't even describe it. And so now we're being given a totally opposite picture. We've got this beastliness. Now we're being given a picture of God and what he's like. And it shows, well, let me just read it. Verse 9. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Who's the Ancient of Days? God the Father. Ancient of Days, God the Father. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Okay, what's the picture of white? What do we do when a bride comes up for her wedding and she's dressed all in white? What are we saying? Pure, right? So he's pure. What about hair that's white? What is that picture often? Age and wise, been around, knows some things, right? So we've got pure and we've got wisdom is being communicated. His throne was fiery flames. I don't know this part. I don't quite understand this, but its wheels were burning fire. I don't know why God's throne would have wheels on it. I don't know if that's literally so the idea being that he can travel everywhere while he's still enthroned. But fire has very much the picture in the Old Testament of the purifying of things. You know, you take metal and you heat it up on fire until you can take all the dross off of it. And so it has that picture a little bit of purifying things, but also of judgment, of bringing purity. As a fire, a stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So, I believe what God is showing Daniel and what he's showing us is he's saying, look, you're living on a planet that is being dominated by beastly empires. It is not a fun place to be. You are being consumed. You are being dominated by those things. But God sees it. He sees it. And he's pure. He's holy. He's wise. He's a good judge because he can purify things. And he's going to deal with it. And that is the picture that's being given us. That yes, there are evil structures of humanity. There are horrible things that we're living in right now. But he's not sitting up in heaven going, whatever. He notices it. He sees it. And he, the Ancient of Days, is aware of what's going on. Oh, man, that took way longer than I expected. Let's keep rolling here. The Son of Man. Go to verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a Son of Man. Who do you think that is? Amen. Did you know that very verse right there is how Jesus responded when he was on trial before he was crucified? He said, but you will see coming on the clouds the Son of Man. It was very clear what he was saying. Anybody who was a Jew knew exactly what he just meant. He just said, I'm that guy. And that was either total blasphemy to call yourself the Son of God, the Son of Man, this one whom God is going to turn the earth over to, or he really is that person. And they chose the first, of course, and crucified him. But there was no doubt Jesus knew who he was and what he was saying about this. And he, this Son of Man, came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. It's basically we're getting some of that same picture of that rock that was cut out, but not with human hands, from chapter 2, and it hit the feet, and then it became a mountain that filled the whole earth. Again, a picture of a kingdom that is coming, and that Jesus will be the one that is in charge of it. He will be the king. I think one of the things that we've got to get a hold of in this, and it's a little hard for us because we talk a lot about heaven, don't we? I mean, we use that. When we think about God, we think about heaven, and we think about kind of far away, if you will. We have a little bit of a dualistic sense in our mind. There's kind of like the spiritual, and then there's the physical. But the picture that we're being given, what we're being told is there is interaction. This is all of one thing in God's creation. God is not far away. He knows what's going on the earth, and he's going to deal with it, and he has a way to deal with it, with the Son of Man, who's going to come and address the issue. Okay. I knew this was going to take longer than I thought, and it did. Okay, let's go on. Go ahead and go to your notes, and let's look at this, because I was trying to capture this sense that I felt like the Lord was giving me, that we have been sold this idea that we live on the earth and we're going to be, here for a certain period of time. We're eventually going to die, and we're going to go up and sit on a cloud and play a harp. And nothing could be further from the truth as far as the Bible is concerned. I mean, really, that is not a biblical picture at all. It just isn't. And what we're actually being given here, Daniel's getting an overview of history from his point way into the future to the end, and it all involves God interacting with his creation. We're not going up on a cloud somewhere and we're going to say, bye, earth, we don't care about you anymore, I don't care about anything else. I'm just going to go sit up on a cloud and I'm going to kind of be otherly somewhere else. And that's not the case. God is working out the issues that have attacked his creation. Evil has infected his creation, and he's going to make sure that it gets removed completely. Okay. I'm going to try and do this really fast. Chapter 1. This is 5 chapters of human history. These aren't chapters of Daniel. This is kind of an overview of the whole Bible, because Daniel's getting this big scope of human history. I wanted to give us a little bit of context about that as well. So creation before the rebellion of Adam. That's chapter 1. God created the heavens and the earth. Adam and Eve were in blissful, joyful relationship with God. In Genesis recorded that they even walked with God in the cool of the day. That's stunning to me. We're going to go have a walk with God. Here, hold my hand. We're going to go talk to God. We're just going to walk around the garden. Is that a cool picture or what? I think that's awesome. How long that lasted, we don't know. We don't know how long between the time when God created the heavens and the earth and Adam actually rebelled. It doesn't tell us. But that's chapter 1 of creation. That was the time of innocence. Chapter 2, this is the remainder of the Old Testament after the fall, clear up until the arrival of Christ. That's where Daniel is living as far as the unfolding of this history of God's work with his creation. So from the fall of Adam to, like Jesus' baptism, with John the Baptist was really, Jesus considered him an Old Testament prophet. I don't know if you recognize that from the Gospels, but he did. He referred to him as an Old Testament prophet. So that whole period of time is like chapter 2. Daniel lived at that time. But in today's passage, he's being given insight into the remainder of chapter 2, to the end of chapter 3, which I'll talk about in a second, and clear into chapters 4 and 5 that we often don't talk about very much, but they're very clearly spoken of in the book of Revelation. So chapter 3 is the period from the arrival of Christ as the Lamb of God until his second coming. Coming as a conquering king at the Battle of Armageddon and at the end of the Great Tribulation. We are living in that period of time. We're in chapter 3. I want to bring this back down to something maybe we can get our head around a little bit. When I'm talking about God interacting with us on planet Earth and interacting with his creation and not just being far off, we can use metaphors sometimes and we completely lose track of the meaning of them. You've all heard, the Battle of Armageddon, right? You've all heard that. And it'll get used in the newspapers, this is going to happen, we're going to have Snowmageddon, or we're going to have this Mageddon or that Mageddon. And we just kind of mush the whole thing until it doesn't really have any meaning anymore. It's just a big battle, right? I mean, it just kind of gets lost. About 10 years ago, Kathleen and I had the opportunity to go to Israel. And we were actually, this is just still kind of, I want to pinch myself, it was so cool. We were standing on the on Mount Carmel. Okay, so I'm facing south, and the Mediterranean is to my right. This is where Elijah met the prophets of Baal, Mount Carmel. That's the place where we were. It's pretty cool. So the Mediterranean Sea is on my right, and I'm looking down over what's called the Jezreel Valley. It's very fertile. Israel, they got some great farmers there. It was just green everywhere. And I'm standing next to this guy who's on the trip, and he's a retired colonel from the Marine Corps. And we'd been having this conversation with the guy who was leading the tour, and he talked about Megiddo, which is a town in this valley. As a matter of fact, Har Megiddo is how you refer to it. When you anglicize it, our English, it's Armageddon. Har Megiddo. So I'm standing here next to this retired colonel from the Marine Corps, and we're talking about what Mickey has just told us about this location, and he's saying, if you were going to have a big mechanized battle right in the middle of Israel, this would be the place. A whole bunch of Israel is very mountainous. It's got a lot of hills and everything, but at the north, near Mount Carmel, you got this massive plain where there's all these fields. There's going to be a battle there, folks. That's what he's telling us. He's not giving us just, you're going to have this beast and that, and it's all this other world stuff. It's right here on planet Earth. This is going to happen. He is not going to be denied his creation. He's going to set things right. But there is an Antichrist spirit that will fill that fourth beast that is going to fight him tooth and nail to not give up its prize. It's as though you have a lion that has captured its prey and he's got it by the neck, and somebody's going to come and take it away and save it. And that thing is not given up easy. There's going to be a battle for that to come to pass. Now, he gives it all in this very visual language, but this is very real, what's going to happen. We're in the middle of chapter 3. Well, or somewhere maybe near the end of chapter 3, but the point where Jesus has come the first time, but he hasn't yet come the second time to set up a millennial kingdom, which, whoops, hello. I almost went over. That would have been funny. The Dick Van Dyke Show. Yeah, it might have hurt, huh? I'm running out of time, so let me just go to the fourth chapter. There is, at that point, going to be a millennial kingdom which is set up. This is talked about in the book of Revelation, specifically in Revelation chapter 20, where Jesus comes the second time, has this battle at Armageddon, at Har-Megiddo in Israel. There's this massive battle, and Jesus physically shows up and takes command of the planet. This is what happens, people. And at that time, you've got, timing-wise, I won't get into the whole thing, but you've got people who are already saved that are going to be raptured, and you're going to be people that are saved that are going to be resurrected. Everybody's going, wow, this is quite the trip today, Dave. But this is what he's being given, in very broad scope. And Jesus is going to have a kingdom on planet Earth for 1,000 years. And so at the same time, we are going to have people, we are going to be some of these people. I trust everyone in here is saved. We are going to be these people that are going to be the resurrected ones who will be with Jesus, because we're in chapter 3. And at the end of chapter 3, that's when that resurrection happens. So you've got a resurrected Christ ruling the planet. You've got us as resurrected saints ruling with him. I want you to turn to somebody next to you and call him mayor or governor or high official or something, because that is what he's talking about. Does that sound like you're going up to heaven to sit on a cloud and play a harp? I have no idea where that stupid thing came from, because it's not in the Bible anywhere. I'm sorry, it was what? Cloud by a lake. Okay, well, some people just want to fish no matter where they are. David, you would have been a great one of the 12. That's what they seemed to like to do all the time, was fishing. At the end of chapter 4, okay, are you guys still with me? I realize this is like massive, big picture stuff, okay? After this 1,000-year reign, when Christ has been on the earth, there's still going to be mortal people. There are going to be people that live through the Great Tribulation. It's not everybody's going to be wiped out. There's still going to be some people alive, okay? But they're still part of fallen Adam. They're still part of fallen Adam's race. So you've got resurrected people who are really good. You've got Jesus, you couldn't have better government. And yet you've got fallen people that are still going to be living through that 1,000 years. And God, in his mercy and in his honor of human free will, allows people still to rebel against him. Seriously, would you think you'd want to? I mean, you've literally got the best benevolent dictator there has ever been. You have the most awesome form of government. Your local mayor is a good guy because, he likes to go fishing and, he'll take you. And you're living there for this time, and yet people still choose to rebel. We're only given just a little snapshot of this near the end of the book of Revelation. But then there's again a conflict, and finally there's a complete separation. And what comes at that point is the devil and death and Hades, which is the place of the dead, and anybody that followed him are then cast away in the lake of fire, is the phrase that is used. I don't entirely understand what that means, but the picture is clear, It's a place of torment, and it's a place of complete separation from everything that's holy. So Daniel is not given everything that we've got, because the book of Revelation was hundreds of years in the future at this point, 600 years or so, before John received that information. But Daniel's being given this whole big picture of what's coming for humanity. That ought to change our thinking. When we see this whole big picture and we go, I'm this little speck, and I'm right here in the middle in chapter 3. How does that affect how I live now for the rest of all these other chapters? Because think about this, folks. You're going to live those chapters. Seriously, just wrap your head around that for just a second. I know it's hard because you start thinking about eternity and it kind of makes your head hurt. You know, actually, kind of sometimes it almost makes us feel afraid a little bit, doesn't it? Because it's like it doesn't end. We don't have anything that doesn't end. We always think in terms of endings. You won't want it to end, and neither will I. So don't make your head hurt right now, but just understand, God's creation is so good, He's not willing to just obliterate it. He wants to redeem it. But He's going to take that which has savaged His creation, and He's finally going to separate it out so that it can be completely apart from, and we will never have to deal again with evil. It'll be finally repaired. So how should we then think about our life? How should we then think, because we're here now, what does it do to us? Number one, perspective. God is at war with evil, and He is going to win. Even if we mess up our part, He is going to win. Our existence is eternal. All humans, say that with me, all humans will exist forever. For all humans will be resurrected. The sad part is, some of them are going to be resurrected to be with the Lord forever, and some of them are going to be resurrected to be apart from Him forever. This life is short when compared to eternity. Any sacrifice we make now is so minor compared to the glorious reward that awaits those who are His. It's perspective. We're talking about millions of years from now, we can still be talking to each other. Having good time. I'm late. Don't you have questions you want to ask of some of these guys that went before us? I mean, I want to sit down with Moses and go, what did it look like when the sea stood up on both sides like a wall and you walked through? I mean, were you freaking out like, what in the world is going on here, God? Wouldn't that be pretty intense? Yeah, I'd like to have that conversation. I'm going to get to have it. I don't know how long I have to wait in line. I guess Moses' line might be really long. But we'll have all eternity to wait. So I was like, okay, well, save my space. I'm going to go talk to Peter for a minute, and I'll come back. Be like Disneyland. There you go. Moses will be one of the, you guys remember e-tickets? When everything wasn't, you didn't just get in, you got the e-tickets and the less tickets, and and then there was, it's a small world after. Never mind. We're going to be, you have a body, but you are not a body. You are a spirit. And you're going to live forever. And it's going to be a good forever in Christ. This is the best news we could possibly have, is to hear that God loves His creation so much, He's going to redeem it. Even at the cost of this massive conflict that He allows to happen so that we sort ourselves out. Those who love Him from those who hate Him. That's the reality of it. That's what Daniel's being given, and that's what we're being told. Okay, hope. I would say that, at least it does for me, it really blunts my fear of death. If I know that this body's just going to fall off, and I'm getting older, You might not have noticed that. And I have had in the last 2 months, two guys that I knew pretty well that aren't much older than me that both passed away. One of them was a friend of mine I knew all the way from California. He actually dated my sister way back when in high school. And came home one day, and he had a cancer, and a month later he was gone. And then a pastor up in Renton, Dave McAllister, I was just at his memorial. He was 59 years old, and he passed away. He died. Folks, this life is short. I'm not trying to be morbid by bringing that up. I'm just trying to say we got to keep this in perspective, because if we're living for just now, man, that ain't enough. It ain't enough for me. I want to be living for something much better. But, I got to share this. His wife, Dave McAllister's wife, is a rock. She was just amazing. Tandy got up and preached to us at her husband's memorial for like 20 minutes and didn't shed a tear. She just told us about their life together. They were married for 37 years. They met when they were 10 in a little town in Oregon, and he kept wanting to date her, and her parents are like, you can go get some milk with her at the grocery store, but that's all. And he'll come right back. So he's told some of these stories and stuff. And man, she was awesome. But she said that Dave had a couple of kind of, I don't know, maybe God was preparing him for what was coming. David had a stroke years ago, okay, and so he'd lost a lot of body function. His arms weren't working well. Dave was this big strapping guy too, so it was really hard for him, because he was just really capable, did a lot of stuff, and he loved to fish. But he just all of a sudden he took a turn, and he was just going down rapidly. But he woke up a couple of times in the night, and he just looked at Tandy, and Tandy was, awakened by his jostling around. And he just looked at her just kind of out of the blue, and he said, I'm not afraid of death anymore. And he went back to sleep. And a couple of nights later, he woke up, and he looked at her, and he said, death isn't going to hurt. And he just went back to sleep. And then he passed, not too much after that. Our physical death doesn't have to be nearly so scary if we've got a grip of the reality that we're going to live forever. Not a faint hope, not this kind of thing we talk about every so often in church and we think we're going to end up floating around on a cloud and playing a harp, but a physical, resurrected body with Jesus, waiting in line for Moses. That's going to happen. You're going to be there. Justice. God's good creation has been savaged. Because we are part of this creation, we too have experienced the pain of evil. Unless God brings justice, it is as though our suffering did not bother him. His justice places proper value on his creation and on us. Don't you see stuff on the news that just makes you sad? It just makes you go, man, this is crazy. Where are we living? What in the world is going on? But did you ever stop and think, why do I even have that sense in my heart? If people are just cockroaches, I'm not going to shed a tear over swatting a fly. Right? But there's something different about humanity. There's a dignity, there's a nobility to who we are and who we were made to be. And God's not okay with the damage that has happened to you. Don't get mad at God. Get mad at the devil. God is not the author of this evil. He's trying to bring it to a conclusion. He's trying to bring an end to it. He wants justice for us. But there's a process that has to be worked out as he does the sorting out. Compassion. When we see how awful the finality of judgment to come, of the judgment to come, we long for people's salvation. You know, that's not talked about much here in Daniel, but boy, it really comes clear in Revelation chapter 20. Everybody's going to get resurrected. Did you hear me? Everybody is going to be resurrected. That means everybody lives forever. The question is where? The question is where? Man, that needs to move us to care about people enough to pray for them consistently, to draw them into Jesus' kingdom, because he will come and he will separate things. He will. Finally, meaning. Our lives have a purpose and a value far beyond this life. Our hearts, our character, who we are is being formed to be like Jesus. That's the promise of the cross. The sanctification process is making us like Jesus. So not only are we going to live together, we're going to want to live together forever. Because you'll be really good. And I'll be way better than I am, I promise. We're going to want to. And we're going to be rulers with him in his kingdom. We have work to do ahead of us. It's not just going up and playing harp. That sounds boring to me. I'm sorry. Our investment right now in the spiritual formation, in the shaping of our character and of our being, pays eternal dividends. It's going to go on forever. Nothing you do for Jesus is ever going to be wasted. It's going to go on for eternity. I think about that for a second, and I think that my mind goes back right now to Dave McAllister's memorial. Dave was an evangelist. He was a pastor, but I think his first love was as an evangelist. And at one point, one of the people that was kind of giving memorial to David said, "How many of you are sitting here because Dave led you to the Lord, or you came back to the Lord through him?" I kid you not, a third of the room raised their hand. Do you think that's going with David into eternity? Yeah, because people are going to live forever. This is for all the marbles, folks. It's a big deal what we do now with our lives and how we live. Whether or not we're hopeful and we have perspective and we're looking for God's justice and we're wanting everybody to experience his compassion and that same meaning that we're looking for.